Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Nicola, great to have you here. To start with, please introduce yourself and tell everybody about the great work that you do.
Super, thanks, Alan. So you said already, my name's Nicola. I am the leadership coach and people person. I have been doing that role for about 18 months when I set my business up. So the kind of work I do really falls into three parts. I work one-to-one with senior leaders across mostly very purpose-driven businesses. That's not to say they're all charities, some are social purpose businesses, and some are for-profit businesses, but have kind of purpose really sitting at the heart of what they're doing. So that's one-to-one work that I do. I also work a lot with the whole of a leadership team. So that I've noticed is somewhere where really powerful stuff can happen in terms of moving that organization forward and really getting to the heart of a purposeful, values driven culture. If you can really get everyone in that leadership team aligned around their vision for that, super amazing things happen. And then the other work, and this tends to be a bit of a lead on from the work that I've maybe done one-to-one or with the leadership team. I also do some work around culture consultancy. So again, how do you kind of make that purpose-driven, values-led culture at the heart of the way that an organization operates? Um, so that was kind of, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, that was the dream job. That was the kind of exactly what I hoped to be doing when I was grown up enough. Turns out I actually am grown up enough. Prior to that, I was working at EY, one of the big four professional services firms, always in kind of learning, leadership development, talent development roles. Had an amazing career for 22 years at EY, which is a bit ironic because I promise you, I started that role thinking exactly what I want to be doing. But get a year on my CV with somewhere like at the time they were called Ernst and Young, and I'll be made, and then I can go off and do what I really want to be doing. Well, they captured my heart for 22 years, and a big part of that was one, the variety of roles and a variety of things that I got to do, but two, how close I felt to being able to really be who I wanted to be, let my kind of values shine. I don't think that was the language I would have used back as a kind of slightly naive 25-year-old, but in hindsight, that's exactly what happened. So I had loads of very interesting roles at EY, but just something pulled me to go and see what could happen outside of the uh, very nice, very comfortable environment of EY. And that's what led me to becoming the leadership coach and people person.
Brilliant. And where can people get hold of you?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So searching for Nicola Pye, it's a kind of easy surname to search for, PYE. But I've also just recently set up my new website, which is www.nicolapye.com. And people can contact me through my website.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, you mentioned 18 months into your new business, and so
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's the best thing so far and what's the biggest challenge?
So the best thing, actually, I have to say, I kind of really uh, noticed it when I was asking clients for testimonials and feedback for my website. I hadn't realised how much they saw me as part of their team. So again, I'm giving a massive plurality again about one of my values, but one of my values is very, very strong and important to me is this kind of sense of family and belonging and being part of something. And that was the one thing I really worried about as I was leaving a great team. It was nothing about my team at all. That was a bit heartbreaking to leave that team. And so to have managed to kind of create something where I've got 4 or 5 clients who are saying you're part of the team. We feel like you're totally side by side with us. So that has been, yeah, I kind of said earlier in my intro that when I'm grown up enough, I'll be able to do this kind of thing. And to kind of know that already, just 18 months in, that these are how clients perceive me and that they do want me to be in that team working on some really complex and difficult challenges with them. That's been the absolute highlight. The challenge, challenge, I have to say, is all up here. It's those limiting beliefs and those things that. So I have one that's a recurring theme for me, which is what if? What if suddenly no one wants to work with me anymore? What if this happens? What if that happens? And just kind of keeping those. I think they're helpful to some extent because they keep you on your toes. But keeping them just low enough so that they don't paralyze you, so that they don't start making you make just safe decisions all the time. That's been my biggest challenge, and I think will be my ongoing challenge as well.
Have you come across an author called Jim Lawless by any chance?
No, I don't believe I have.
So he's written a book called Taming Tigers, and it's about exactly what you're talking about. And the story that I remember, one of them in the book, is a guy who is in a bar and he sees a very attractive girl that he wants to go and talk to. And he makes up his mind that he's going to. So he takes the first step, and then he hears a voice in his head say, "What are you doing?" And so he responds in his head saying, "I've decided I'm going to go and introduce myself." And the voice says, "What, to her? But she's beautiful. You're nothing. You're just ordinary." And it just carries on. I won't tell
Yeah.
you more, just in case you're interested to read the book. But
Oh, I am. Yeah.
oh well,
There's a it's all over Google, but there's a similar story called Murphy's Plough. Have you ever heard
no,
about that one? Basically, two farmers next door to each other. One needs to borrow the plough, and in the walk round, he's by the time he gets round, he's convinced himself that there's no way he'll lend him the plough. So yeah, the door opens and he gets a very different response to what he thought. It's a very similar thing, that just persuading yourself that this is going to be,
Murphy's Plough.
yeah, Murphy's Plough.
Okay, have to look that one up. All
Yeah,
right.
it's just a short little anecdote story, but it's a good one for making that exact point.
I love those kind of lessons into stories because they're just so much easier to take in than
Yeah,
theory and all of that stuff. Um,
that's totally how my brain is wired. Tell me a good story, and I will remember it forever. Try and get me to like understand some theory, and then remember that theory. I really struggle with that.
yeah, yeah, same. So we've got a pretty simple task now. I'm going to tip out these 60 cards from the Values Jam deck. And how many piles would you like me to create in front of me? I'll just shuffle them a little bit more while you're deciding.
So I have a funny thing about the power of three. So I'd like you to split into three, please.
Okay, they are different sizes. And so would you like pile one on my left, pile three on my right, or the one in the middle?
Let's go for pile three, please.
Okay. So what we've got here is 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24 cards. So a number between those two numbers, please.
I think it'll be nine, please.
9. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. So funny that you were mentioning this thing about what if nobody wants to work with me?
Ah, interesting.
So
Interesting.
security. Yeah, and your response is interesting. Interesting is always an interesting response, isn't it? Because it's like,
Mm.
mm, not totally convinced. And security is one of those values that, it's if we drew, say, love or excitement or family, we'd be like, oh yeah, this is great. Whereas security's got a bit more kind of seriousness about it, perhaps.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so let's see where we go. And the first question is this: what does security mean? And what does it look, feel, and sound like?
So that in I almost let out a sigh of relief then, because you're absolutely right. For me, security does have a seriousness to it. It almost has a formality, like a formality and a so where initially I started to go was um, financial security, and to kind of almost like uh, started to think buildings. Do I feel secure in that kind of environment that I'm in? Um, that's actually, if I go a little bit deeper, that's probably not what if I think of security in terms of a value to me. That's probably not where I would go. For me, security feels like being surrounded by the people that make me feel secure. It's about having relationships where I can show up being totally myself, where I can uh, ask for help, I can get support, and also that it's a sort of reciprocal relationship. So yeah, for me, security is about a relationship security, that almost no matter what happens, that you don't have the financial security, if you don't have the building security, you've got enough people around you that you can ask for help and that people can do something to support you.
Okay. So what you're talking about there is this kind of um, sense of security rather than security being a thing in itself necessarily and dependent on how other people treat you and the environment that's created so that you have that safety, I suppose. And you talked about being yourself, and I wrote down the word confidence because that seems to come into this. Because when you feel that safety and sense of security, and others around you are accepting and all of that sort of stuff, then that allows you to just do what you would want to do rather than be questioning yourself all the time about, am I going to be doing the right thing according to these other people, right?
Absolutely. And I guess a slight caveat to that is that I feel I'm interestingly, I feel compelled to say is I appreciate I am saying that from a position where I don't actually have to worry about my physical security or my financial security. So I yeah, I feel very lucky to be able to say that. So it's almost like I can go to a deeper level of what that sense of security really means to me, because I have the good fortune of not having to worry about, am I going to be warm enough tonight? Am I going to feel secure in where I'm going to be sleeping, etc.
This is a really interesting point because, and I know that you work generally in the value space, so I'm going to kind of broaden this now just for a while because I sometimes have a hard time when I think about what you've just talked about. You know, when I'm doing my work around values, I sometimes hear my voice in my head saying, "It's all right for you saying that to people." But
Mm.
oh, and actually, you've just reminded me now. I heard, no, it was a television, it was a documentary, something to do with the Roundtree Foundation. So they're all focused on, well, on poverty in the UK. And it was an interview with a priest, I think, man of the cloth anyway. And they were visiting homes in somewhere in the northwest of England. And this guy said, I deliver food to people that can't afford it. And sorry, I get emotional thinking of this actually.
Yeah.
He went into this house and he said the kids were ripping the carrier bags open to get the food.
Mm.
Um, and so sometimes I think, when you say to people, "Oh, you should be living your values," it's kind of
Mm.
easy for us in our
Yeah,
situation to be saying that.
it
But
is.
what about somebody who hasn't got something to eat? So what
Mm.
I'm curious about your take on that.
So for those of us that are privileged enough to be able to focus on those more self-actualization, those kind of creating something bigger than ourselves type values, I think it's about tapping into which ones of those values can we give, can we share with other people. So, for example, one of my values is generosity. And I see that generosity as a financial generosity, but I also see it as a generosity with my time. So I like to think I do good things for people and help them and donate to charities, but also with my clients, if I'm working with a charity, am I going to charge them the same amount? Am I going to watch the clock quite so carefully? No, of course I'm not, because I'm going to get super passionate about the cause that they're trying to pursue, the people that they're trying to create a better life for or help. And so that's kind of how I reconcile it in my mind. That yes, I do have the privilege that I can be talking with clients who, like me, have privilege and don't have to be worrying about those basic security type values. But we can use those values that we've got to do good things and to be purposeful in our lives.
Yeah, I think it's a great
Well,
way.
that went deep, didn't it?
Well, yeah, and why not? And I think it's a great way of looking at it. And there's a lot of parallels actually with the way that I work. So I, like you, if I'm working with an organization that maybe hasn't got the budget, then so what? You still want to do the
Yeah.
and it's actually a phrase that I've used since 2014, which is pay more disrespect to money.
Mm,
Because I think if you make your decisions based on money, you kind of sometimes don't really make the right ones. And
mm.
why should it be glorified that in the way that it so often is and prevent you doing just what you want to do? Um,
Yeah.
and just one other thing you made me think of actually, and that's this meaning of security, because when you were talking about if it's a charity, am I going to watch the clock so much? Am I going to charge them the same rate? That is another expression of security because I'm secure in the knowledge that I have a choice and
Mm,
it's up to me. And I'm not beholden
yeah.
to charge X or bill all the hours or whatever. So it's great to open up that meaning of security. What about the metaphor part of that question? So when you think of security, what images come to mind? What sounds come to mind? And what feelings come to mind?
So that's an interesting one because let's go back to the power of three. Um, so as soon as I think, so I have it's a shame I'm not wearing it today, but I have a necklace that my husband bought me quite recently, actually. It's a pod of peas with three pearls inside, and obviously you'd normally see just two, but he deliberately got it because he knows of the power of three for me. And that instantly, so the power of three for me is my metaphor for security. I grew up in a family of three, my mum and my identical twin sister and I. My family now is my husband, my daughter, and I. We, yeah, the three is my metaphor for feeling secure when I'm surrounded by family, when I'm surrounded by people that for me it's around there's another metaphor actually coming to mind as well. There's something about lifting. For me, feeling secure is about having people around you that want to lift you and want you to help you be the best that you can be. So interestingly, because I'm normally very visual, I normally can jump in very quickly to a metaphor. Um, this conversation is really just bringing people to mind as opposed to sort of strong. So I've got some strong imagery in my head of people that create security for me.
Okay. And then if we move it to audio, what sounds come to mind when you think of security? And then finally, the feelings piece.
So sound. the sounds would be the C. Um, so for me, this is something about security, not feeling constrained by that. And the C is like looking out to sea, I suppose, is the classic. You know, that's the time when you can kind of see that breadth and that like just how big this world really is. So that C, yeah, the C sound, the Thor, is bringing a very strong feeling of security to me. I guess it's probably a load of lovely, lovely memories as well, where you know the beach is my happy place. And then feelings. Maybe you could explain a little bit more about what you mean when you ask me to talk about what my feelings are around security.
When you hear or see the word security, what feelings do you get? Um, and you've kind of touched on some of it already because you talked about how you think of security not as this confining thing,
Mm,
but being free. And that seems counterintuitive in a way, but
yeah.
I totally get where you're coming from. So it's just diving into that a little bit more.
So yeah, so from a kind of physical feelings perspective, um, there's definitely a kind of warmth to it, a warmth that I'm getting from other people. I guess even just a um, feeling of physically being warm so that you can be free, so that you can just go, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to go and do this. And then from a sort of deeper, more emotional sense of feelings, the, uh, the word peace, the feeling at peace comes to mind. That sense that you've got the security in place, you have those people around you, as we've already talked about, you have those other more basic needs catered for. So you can just feel peace, calm, collected, um, knowing, yeah, there's a confidence piece, there's a piece of I know I've got this. But even if I haven't, I've got people around me who are going to have my back and look after me if they need to.
That's quite weird because when I asked you the question about images and sounds and feelings, and I was listening to what you were starting to say and also thinking at the same time, and when it came to the feelings bit, the first one that popped into my head was peace.
It
But
was
yeah,
interesting.
but then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to explain that because that sounds a bit weird. You know, why is peace popped into your head? But so the thread was so images for security. I think of um, somebody who is really stable. So either
Mm,
like a big dinosaur with its tail behind it, or else somebody who's really well set with their feet slightly apart and difficult to move. So that kind of sense of solidity, if you like, because of being secure. Um, the sound, I found myself thinking of silence actually, which
interesting. Yeah.
but again, because of this thing that it didn't matter, because
Mm,
you were secure, and then that feeling about just peace. And you mentioned confidence. That's come up again. So
mm,
it's a very quiet confidence, though, not a kind of rah rah confidence type thing.
mm.
Um, so I'm thinking that our conversation so far has really been focused on um, an exploration of when a really strong, deep sense of security is in place.
Yeah.
That seems to be the tone of what we've talked about. So I'm going to take us to the other side of the coin, and I'd like
Mm.
to ask you, where have you noticed a lack of security?
So, hmm. For me, so I've had challenges with my health throughout my life. I started with chronic illness in my teens, had chronic fatigue syndrome, and then at various points that has reared its head again. I had a really difficult pregnancy with my daughter, and I'm sure part of that was because I had this, chronic illness in the background. So I then, about 9 years ago, got sepsis, and I knew you were going to go there with that question. The absolute rat bag. But that when have I not felt secure? When I realised that things were really serious when I had sepsis, and at that point, well, the ultimate vulnerability is to kind of know that you're fighting for your life at that point. That that was not a feeling at all, and very scary feeling. So that was a big, that's kind of almost the contrast that I've lived my life by since, that I never wanted to feel like that again. And I've done everything I possibly can to, to make my body feel. So I had the emotional feeling of security probably at that time, but I don't know if I had the security in my body, that my body could cope and could respond to the getting an infection. And I think that was a really big turning point. And I've never really framed it for myself actually in terms of security before, but that absolutely was what it was. I wanted to be as secure in my body as I was in my mind and in my relationship and in the other aspects of my life.
Mm. Well, thanks for sharing. And I don't want to dwell on this, but I didn't quite catch when you were describing when you were a teenager what you had. What
Mm.
was it you said it was?
It was chronic fatigue syndrome. Some people call it ME.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it was so that's the theme of all of the chronic illness that I've had, is all autoimmune
yeah.
issues. And so that's the kind of something you live with all the time, because you never quite know, is that virus that you just call, is that bout of food poisoning, is that going to be the thing that causes it to your immune system to go, no, hang on, I really don't like this, I'm going to shut down on you again. And so that, as I say, when I got sepsis, I'd done I'd learned loads about myself, loads about my body, to get over having chronic fatigue syndrome, but I hadn't taken control. And I think that's the thing that I decided to do once I'd had sepsis was, no, I'm taking control of this. I am doing everything I possibly can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So actually, health and well-being became a much higher value priority for me.
Yeah. And this might sound like a strange question, but do you think in some ways the fact that you have experienced such extreme lack of security helps you to understand it better? Because it comes back to what we were talking about earlier around when you're in a privileged position, you can't really understand the situation that who are not in the same position are in,
Mm.
whereas you have seen that side.
That's an interesting question. I I feel it helps me to be more compassionate, more empathetic, to some extent. I don't believe it helps me to understand it, um, because I it's probably another one of my values speaking here, but I feel everyone has their own unique experience of life, and even for people who've had, on paper, the similar sort of things to me, well, I wouldn't presume that they've had exactly the same journey or have exactly the same experience of that. So I think it helps me to relate. I think it, from being a coach perspective, it absolutely helped me to create a trust and create an openness in that relationship. I wish it did help me to understand, but I don't think it does help me to understand.
And I think that's we have a tendency, don't we, to make so many assumptions about other people
Yeah.
rather than seek to understand more.
Yeah.
And it really, I don't know why this has come in my head, but in Values Jam, this sometimes happens that random things suddenly pop in, and I've learnt over time to just go with it and see what happens. But it's this thing about do-gooders. You know, it's the I'm going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. You need this help, and this is what I shall provide.
And it's like crazy. It's and partly I used to think, oh, that's because people are being driven by their egos and they're just wanting to look good and all the rest of it. And some of them are, but actually
Yeah.
other people are purely well intentioned but just
Yeah.
misguided. And
Yeah. I
yeah,
think I think there's another I think there's another group that I tend to see in that space as well, and that is people that have their own personal traumas, personal insecurities,
yeah,
and that ability to do good meets a need. Purposeful leaders from across all sorts of businesses. And two of the most heart wrenching of those interviews with purpose led leaders were people who were working in charities, and the work that they did in those charities was specifically connected to the personal trauma that they've experienced. And I was just in total awe of these people that they had chosen um, to not only seek to do good and have good coming from the very, very horrendous experiences that they'd had, but they would want to do it as in something so close to that experience. And one of the chief execs I asked and said, money asking, how can you be doing something that is a daily reminder of your horrendous experience you've had in your life? And she said, how can I not? How can I not have that in my life every day? I just found it absolutely fascinating. There's people who are actively um, wanting to do good and kind of know that it's in a almost perverse way healing them at the same time.
yeah. There's I know what you mean because there's a lady I know in Australia, Danny Mason Kinder, whose daughter, when she was 12, was killed by her horse, or they suspect. Um, and so Danny set up the Be Kinder Foundation and now helps schools and communities to combat children bullying and all of that sort of thing using her daughter's
Wow.
artwork and poetry. And when I listen to Danny, I'm just in awe of her because she just takes such strength from a tragedy and
Yeah,
is has turned it into creating such a positive impact in the world. It's amazing.
yeah. Oh, what an amazing woman.
Mm. So let's play with this. In Values Jam, there's the opportunity for you to create your own question. So I'm going to invite you to do that with security. So just starting with who, what, where, when, why, how. What's a question that you're holding? And if you've got the answer, then please do share it. Or otherwise, if you want me to go first, then I can.
That's a really easy one, actually, you honestly didn't prepare me for this, did you? But that question comes to mind quite easily. So one of the things around my business and being the leadership coach and people person I talk about a lot is brave conversations, being a brave leader. So my question is that what would brave security look and feel like?
Ooh. So, what would brave security look and feel like? I think the first thing that comes to mind actually is reduced levels of whatever. So being brave enough to experience what it's like not to be so comfortable.
Mm.
Um, and just thinking that through, this doesn't sound very credible actually when I'm hearing it before I say it, but I think I've made that choice. So I left the corporate world, a bit like you, maybe different reasons. I got fed up with um, what I first thought were one-offs, people that were making decisions for their personal interest rather than the long-term benefit of the organization. And then as I went through my career, I just kept coming up against these people in the corporate world. And I thought, so I chose to leave. And now, a bit like you, you talked earlier about how you give your time, for instance, and you also donate to charities. I I don't do this kind of very scientifically, but I probably work around about 50% pro bono on various things and a range of different things. Um, and so I don't have the income that I would have had if I had continued my corporate career.
Yeah. Same.
But going back to that phrase earlier about paying more disrespect to money, it doesn't matter.
Mm.
And for instance, I'll give you a comparison just to put that into perspective. I love celebrating birthdays or occasions by going to a three-star Michelin restaurant, for instance. But I can enjoy sitting on the beach, listening to the water, and getting just as much pleasure for that, which costs zero. So
Yeah.
it's kind of doesn't matter. So is that brave? I'm not sure. Um, and then I'll give you an example of where I feel completely not brave or courageous. When I watch the news, for instance, on the news last night was Gaza, and then when Ukraine has been on the news, I've just thought to myself, Alan, you wouldn't be able to cope. If that happened here,
Mm.
how would I survive? I just
I know.
wouldn't be capable. So there's a the first one seems like a not particularly brave version of what I have done, and then the other one gives you an example of where I would just be completely lost.
Mm.
What about you?
Uh, for me, I'm taking that in a slightly different direction, actually. I think for me, brave security is the opposite to playing it safe. And when I mean playing it safe, I probably mean in terms of the clients I seek to work with, the relationships I have with those clients, the impact that I want to have, from that's just from a work perspective, my own personal growth that I know comes when I'm taking myself just outside that comfort zone space. So doing more of that. And I think being intentional, brave security kind of for me implies like holding two almost contrasting things together. And to do that, you have to be quite intentional about it. So being deliberate about, okay, this might feel a bit uncomfortable, but I'm gonna do it anyway and see what happens.
Mm. You're making me think of something else actually that I don't know how relevant this is, so let me throw it at you and see what you think. Um, I'm I think I'm learning that we tend to overestimate our own role and contribution to things and underestimate what everybody else does and what consequence does and what serendipity does,
Mm.
all of that stuff. So what's in my mind at the moment is I had this idea to create something called the K20. You're familiar with the G20, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I work in the kindness space quite a bit, and I just thought, oh, that'd be interesting to create something called the Kindness 20, which would be basically a vehicle to bring together all of the people in the global kindness community that are already doing great work, but to somehow amplify that message through them being together, and then specifically to feed into G20 so that government policies can be imbued with kindness, as well as other things. So, this is a bit of a weird story, it won't take too long. I had a call with a lady called Francesca Donlan, explained this, and she said, "Oh, I think that's an amazing concept. And I'm going to see my friend who works at a university on Monday, and I think she might be interested to host an event." So I said, "Well, ask her if she would host the inaugural launch of the K20
Mm.
next year in February." And she said, "I will." And then she sent me an email on Tuesday saying she's in.
Wow. Yeah.
So yesterday the three of us had a call, and after the call, I thought, oh my God, we've got
This is
someone.
real. This is happening.
Yeah, but my answer to myself was, well, there's going to be loads of people that are going to want to do this, and they'll help out. So it's
Mm.
not about you. It's just go with it and see what happens. So
Yeah.
that was.
Oh, I
So
love that.
what do you think about that thing about us overplaying us?
100%. That's actually I think that's one of the things I noticed in my sort of, as me and EY were sort of starting to just go in a slightly different routes, and I could feel myself separating. One of the reasons I, now looking back with the beautiful benefit of hindsight, I don't think I saw it at the time, was I was overplaying myself. I'd become, um, I'd become, even people would describe me out loud as like, I'm the glue of the team. I'm the person that holds everything together. And that had become huge in my mind, this sense of, if I am not there holding everything together, what will happen? And you know what? Nothing bad happened. In fact, I think it probably was the right thing. That team that I'd created a really solid foundation for grew and changed and adapted. Um, glue is sticky, and I probably could have held them back. Um, so that was a really powerful lesson, and I think I'm really grateful for that lesson, because it took something. It meant I took something into my business, which was, found it fairly easy. And I'm not saying I get this right all the time. There are definitely some things that I take home and dwell on a little bit, but mostly I think I've been able to stay very much in the, I'm here to be part of this process. I'm not here to be the
Right.
whole of this process.
And do you, so I'm curious now about how that fits in the world of a coach. Because my traditional view of a coach is the person who helps you focus on you and what you can do and how you can be better and how you can operate at, max and all the rest of it. Whereas what we're talking about here is actually you as part of something. So does that
Yeah,
come into you, or has that come into your work so far, or not?
absolutely. Yes, I think so. And I probably hadn't really thought about this that much until becoming a coach, where I was a coach at EY, and I had lots of very, very powerful coaching relationships. But in essence, money wasn't, like people weren't saying, I buy Nicola Pye to be my coach. That is now the case. And one of the things I've realized, and it sort of goes back to that uh, thing I was telling you earlier about the feedback and what my clients were telling me, is I've realized there's kind of two kinds of coaches. There's a coach who does a brilliant job standing very removed and being a neutral, very, very objective observer. And there's a coach who feels like they're more side by side with the people that they're coaching. I think Brené Brown says about it being in the ring. Um, I'm in the ring, and I make no apologies for it. I'm not the right coach for everyone. And there are times when I say to my clients, do you know what? I think you need somebody who's out of the ring. I think you need someone who can take you on a slightly different journey for what you're trying to achieve. But if you want someone in the ring and you want someone that feels like they are right by your side, then that's the coaching you'll get from me.
Great. And you know, that feels like a kind of good natural time to draw this conversation to a close.
Yes.
And there is one final question, which is, what are you encouraged to do differently about security as a result of this conversation?
So I would take that all the way back to my first reaction, and I think you spotted it, my facial expressions. Um, my first thought about security was shackling, was some kind of restriction. And this conversation has really helped me to realize I need security. I am a person that thrives when security is there for me. And I'm going to reframe it, and I'm going to really hold on to that image of the sea and the sounds of the sea, and keep reminding myself that security is freedom for me.
That's great to hear. And actually, it's an echo of some previous values jams where these kinds of words have been chosen, and there's been a kind of not totally positive initial reaction,
Mm.
and I include myself in that. But then the conversations have gone on to be fascinating, and because of that, kind of almost more enjoyable than if you were expecting it to be a good one. Do you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
100%.
yeah.
That's really, really good point.
And what I'm encouraged to do for different, I'm going to look up Murphy's Plough for short. I want
It's
to
a
read
great story to tell. I think
Okay.
it's some versions have even got a swear word in them.
Oh, okay. I can handle that. So, Nicola, thank you so much for this values jam. Just to finish, could you remind people where they can find you?
I would love anyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for Nicola Pye, and also feel free to check out my website, which is www.nicolapye.com. And there's a button that people can connect with me there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Bye.